Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Love Aspect podcast. I am your host, Hannah Dunley, along with her co-host and partner,
Joshua Saunders. Once again, thank you for returning to grace us with your presence again. Thank you very much.
Now, for today's episode, I figured that we could tackle a couple of questions that I think, are interesting, and some of our female viewers may want the answer to from men and from women. So, we're gonna ask questions. I'm going to answer first, and then, we'll get Josh's opinion, because I myself am interested as well in the male point of view, and just to see, how different it is. Are men and women really all that different? Or, are we much the same? So just, grab your cup of tea, relax, chill, and just enjoy the podcast.
Absolutely.
Now, for question number 1, what do you think a man's role should be in the home in 2025? Now, obviously, as we know, yonks ago in the 50s, the men all went out working and the women generally stayed at home, and they dealt with the kids and the house chores and that kind of thing. And obviously, as we know, in 2025, that's a lot different. Some men are choosing to go to work. Some men are having kids. Some men are not having kids. And some men are choosing to stay at home while the woman goes out and works. So in a lot of cases, the roles are reversed. In our case, I suppose I'm a bit like the housewife. So I stay at home, and take care of most of the chores and the cooking. And I'm really appreciative of Josh for, going out and working and supporting us both as much as he can. And I support us where I can too. And, the only chore really that Josh has to do is changing the bed, because I am useless at that. My hand-eye coordination always says no. And to be honest, I just find it kind of stressful. It's the only thing though. I'll do everything else. I just hate that chore. And ladies, I think we all know everyone always has one chore. And gents, we all have one chore that we just really can't stand to do. And for me, as I said, that would be making the bed. So I think the role of a man in the home in 2025 is to do whatever it is he does that makes him happy, while also enabling him to support within the home. And I think a lot of men need to be more kind of emotionally vulnerable. Now, not to the point of being extreme and crying every 5 minutes, because, that doesn't really help anybody. But, they need to be able to ask sometimes, do you need help? Or, what do you need help with? I find from the female perspective, a lot of women, this is actually very silly. So I don't like this, but a lot of women will want a guy to help, but they won't ask, and then they'll get mad that he didn't help. Men can't read minds, ladies. We have to be telling them what we need if we need anything. Now, I'm quite lucky because, I'm very blessed to have Josh. He's really good at understanding when I need help and all this kind of stuff. It really works out. And as I said, I do most of the things, and, he works, and, we kind of have, I suppose, that slightly like traditional lifestyle. None of us have kids, for example, and none of us actually want kids. However, I recently invested in a reborn doll. So basically, it's kind of like, they're like realistic style newborn baby dolls. And, I liked that for me because I wanted to have all of the comfort that snuggling and holding a newborn brings without the stress of actually having a newborn. Hopefully that makes sense to somebody. It brings a lot of comfort, and I'm quite lucky that, Josh doesn't find that strange. He fully supports it. And he's really on board with me again, in 2025. Doing anything I can which would give me joy or comfort, without judgment. And I'm the same way as well for him. So the role in the home should definitely be to support in any way you can. And just enjoy it. Life is it's not all hard work all the time. And I want, when Josh comes home, I want him to immediately feel relaxed. I want to care for him as soon as he's coming in the door, and make sure that all of his worries are left at the door if he had any that day. It's just really important for me. So I suppose on to the male perspective now, Josh, what do you think a man's role should be in the home in 2025?
My answer, I would say, is somewhat similar but somewhat different to yours, Hannah. I believe the male role in the house in 2025 should be. I kind of. How do I put this into words? I think it's very situational. I think it's not so much fixed nowadays in the sense of, say, a man and a woman are, they're married, they live in a household together, no children, but the man, maybe he's out of work, maybe he's currently not working, and the woman is working a full-time job, 5 days a week. I do feel that the housework in that case does mainly fall on the man. And this is not so much a gender thing. I would say the same if the man went to work 5 days a week and the woman maybe wasn't working in that moment. I think just whoever has more time at home or has more availability maybe needs to take on more of the housework. I guess depending on the circumstance. If the man, again in this situation, is off work and isn't working part-time, isn't working at all, is just fully out of work and at home, I do feel like he should take on the majority of the housework. That's kind of, I think that's how he can support in that moment in time whilst he's out of work, and how he can take advantage of the fact that he's home when his wife might be out working, again, a 9 to 5 job, if not longer. So I feel like this is a very situational thing for me. So I guess to try and put it in a conclusive answer, for lack of a better word, I think the man's role in the house in 2025 is, I think this is what you were kind of saying, Hannah, like it's where he's needed.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Definitely. And I also think as well, a lot of people, particularly Irish guys, sorry to insult maybe a lot of Irish guys, but a lot of Irish men have mums that have done everything for them because they wanted to. And while it's nice, it doesn't realistically prepare the man to live outside of the home and live with someone else if he's all the time used to having somebody do things for him. Because then it ends up being like, how do you do anything without, the presence of your mom? Having said that, however, I think it's really important for us to discuss, do you know how to do everything? And if you don't, then let me teach you. There's nothing wrong whatsoever with asking for assistance and asking for help. Because, it's only by asking for help that, you learn how to do things for yourself and become a strong and independent man or woman. Because, some women have been a bit spoiled as well, probably. So that's also important. And, anytime you're trying anything new, you're probably going to get it wrong the first couple of times. And that's okay, that's normal. In fact, that's what life is. And sometimes, you can feel like you're getting a lot of things wrong and it seems to be all the time. But, once you persevere and you get through it, it's normally fine, And I suppose now, on to the next question. Should a man pay on the first date? Either why or why not? Now, I think as a woman, my viewpoint might be different, but then again, it may not. I think, to be honest, a lot of men need to be a lot more vocal on how they actually feel about finances. Because some men are very insecure and feel like if they're not paying for the first date, that it makes them less of a man or it says less about them. And to be honest, if they don't communicate that with somebody, then, we're going to end up saying the wrong thing and it's going to go south from there. To be honest, I think there should be like a discussion. So it should be a discussion on, who pays first and why. Or, if you both wanted to go Dutch and each pay half, that's also fine. I think, to be honest, I'm not here for women in particular who come to a date and have no money and automatically expect the guy to pay, because that's highly mean and rude in my viewpoint. I think, to be honest, you should always have money just in case things go south, because then you can pay, you're perfectly fine. And if the guy wants to pay and expresses that it would mean a lot to him to pay, I don't see anything wrong with allowing that. But I do think things should be equal enough, just every so often, but equal enough. So for example, if we go on a date night generally, like, Josh would pay, but then a couple of times in the month, I'll get something for us and, I'll pay for a few things. So I like to contribute and help out where I can. And for me, that's very important because, it just matters that things are as equal as they can be. So, if someone wanted to pay for the first date, that would be fine. And if not, that's also fine. So, Josh, we probably should get the male perspective now on, should a man pay on the first date, either why or why not?
I pretty much agree with what you said, Hannah. Like, I think in this day and age, I really don't think there should be an obligation on one over the other. I'm not really sure where that came from. I guess that was just the way it was. That's kind of certain, I suppose, obligations were assigned to certain genders, I guess, back then. It's a very different time now, though, and I feel nowadays things are really 50-50, or they should be 50-50. So I feel, in the sense of a first date, no one's feeling like they're ripped off or having to spend an arm and a leg every time they go on a date. I think just splitting it 50-50 is, I think that's the fairest way to go. I think if the man insists on paying, then that's down to him. And I think if the woman insists on paying, that's down to her. Hey, if they want to take that on, then that's their choice. And if they've made that choice, they don't get the right to complain. So I do feel like it should be 50-50 nowadays, because if it's a case of the man paying for the first date every time and he has to go through 20 dates before he finds someone, financially that's going to be quite tough. I just think it's fair. No one's going out of pocket, no one's being treated unfairly. No one can kind of weaponize the fact that they've paid. It's just, I think it's the best and fairest way to go. I think it should be 50-50 on the first date.
Great. That's, very insightful. And, on to the next question, I guess, going along the lines of, more financial stuff. The question 3 is, who should plan how the house budget is spent? Now, as for me, I don't think any one person should be planning how the budget for everybody is spent, because you have no idea if you're doing that. Like, you don't have any idea what the other person's needs are. So, Josh and I have a very good budget. We do our, weekly shop once a week for groceries, and he'll come with me to the shop. And to be honest, it's something that we enjoy to do together as a couple. We like to go around the supermarket, having a look at all the different things, and, planning ahead for the week's meals. And, I've recently got into, meal planning myself. So, the day that we go shopping now is the day that I'll do meal prep and prepare stuff. And so I have some stuff frozen that I will then defrost when I'm making that dish. Or, what I did last month, which was quite handy for me, is that I got twice the amount of bolognese ingredients that I would normally use. And I made 2 batches of bolognese and froze 1 in separate batches. So once a week for all of last month, we did have bolognese. And to be honest, it was really handy. So as for the, who should plan how the house budget is spent, I think that is definitely a joint decision, because, it's not a sole decision. And as an example, and this is just an example, I heard of a story recently where this couple had been saving money in a joint account, and the woman was saying, for example, that she made 3 times more money than the man did at his job. And so in their savings account, she was putting in 3 times more money. The idea being that they were saving money for a house. So they weren't even having date nights or anything like that. It was all going into their savings. And so she was kind of saying, yeah, we've been really good. We're strict. We're not doing anything. I've put in 20,000. He's put in 7. And it all seemed to be going rather well. Until such time as Beyonce came out and had a concert. And this woman had said, I want to take out $1,000. It was in America. The woman said, I want to take out $1,000 out of our savings to go to this Beyonce concert. However, instead of it being the conversation I suppose that it should have been. Because in my view at least, it should have been a discussion. Can we afford to do this? We haven't even been getting takeout. We haven't been having date nights. We're gonna get married. We're currently saving for our first home together. She decided to say to him, well, because I earn 3 times more than you and put 3 times more into the savings, I'm better than you and I'm going to take it whether you say I can or not. Now, Josh and I do not have a joint savings account. However, if we did, he'd probably put in twice as much as me. That's just how it is. However, if that was the case, I would be having a discussion with him. Now, obviously, I'm not the most major Beyonce fan and it wouldn't be Beyonce. But, it could be any kind of concert. It could be David Gray or anybody cool like that. The point is, there would be a discussion on both fronts. Do you think I should go and do this? Can I go and do this? Have we got the budget? And if he said to me, we didn't have the budget for that, I would be like, you know what? I don't have to go to the concert. I can catch that online. Somebody somewhere is going to post footage of that. And the way I work is that I would say, and when somebody does post footage of whatever concert it happens to be, let's make a date night. Let's make up some popcorn. Let's snuggle by the fire with some tea and watch this together. That's special for me. So, I just think there should be a lot more discussion. And as for this ridiculous woman, who is ridiculous in my view, if you have enough money to be putting in 3 times more than he does into this group savings, or couple savings, then you should have enough money put aside so that if anything like this comes up, that you're able to do this. Josh, for example, saves his money, and I save mine as well, but both in separate accounts. And I make sure that I have enough money to do whatever it is that I would like to be able to do whenever that comes up. And if I can't afford whatever it is I want to buy at that time, I wait until I can afford to get it and then buy it. And to be honest, for me, this is probably unique to me, it's more exciting, I guess, or pleasurable to get something after you've saved for it. I find that you've saved to buy this item. It's just good to be smart with money. And so that's why I would say that, for the house budget, both parties should equally discuss how that is spent, and it should be a discussion. And remember, you should talk with one another, not at one another. No one person is in control here. Nobody holds the purse strings. As far as I'm concerned, the household budget purse, if you want to call it that, belongs to both people. And both decide how it should go and spent. What do you think, Josh?
I agree. I think it's a joint thing, like you were saying. I think it falls on both people to have input on the house bills and just the bills in general. I think there's house bills, I think there are joint bills, and then there are separate bills. Mm-hmm. When it comes to your own separate bills, maybe you've got a subscription to something that your other half isn't interested in, but you are, and you're going to be the only one to use it, or maybe you've got a credit card or you're paying installments on something you've brought and that comes out monthly or weekly or whatever the case may be. I think that falls purely on the person who has made that decision. But I think for general things, again, if you're both living in a house and you're both using the electricity, you're both using the gas, you're both using the television, you're both using the water, these general kind of things that you're essentially both going to be using, or all going to be using, because they're just the general things. You kind of, in this day and age, you don't really go without them. Everyone takes a bath, we hope. Everyone uses electricity, everyone uses gas. There's no way around it. It's just, that's life, that's living in a house. So in that instance, both people should have an input, and they should both be involved in it. Mm-hmm. And I think not just with the money, but again, providers, like a gas provider, an electric provider. I know for some people it's kind of just, you go with whoever, and that's fine. For others, all these companies, they give different deals, they have different, I don't know what's the appropriate word, tariffs, deals and stuff, packages. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I think, depending, you should both agree on a provider as well for these things. Because I think money falls into that. You could be paying more, you could be paying less. It's important to agree on that for the financial side as well. So, yeah, if it's not something solo, if it's not something... And I should probably preface by saying as well, I think an agreed upon amount should go in that, possibly. You know, you put so much of your own money in and then you keep so much for yourself. You can have, I suppose you'll hold back an allowance for yourself every month. If you don't have a joint account, I suppose agree on how much you're going to send over to who to cover what bills, and you know that should always come first. That agreed upon amount, and that money that needs to come out for those expenses are top priority. And with your own personal money, obviously every relationship's different, but personally I think with your own personal money, you know your allowance that you've got left over after putting in what you need to. If you want to, you know, subscribe to something with that money, your own personal money, then do it. I think realistically, if it's your money and something you personally want to do, that's fine. But absolutely, the expenses come first.
And I suppose going in line with that, we kind of move on to question 3, which I'm asking for curiosity myself to hear, I guess, what a man's point of view is. Because some of these questions are actually just purely for me, because I think it's interesting sometimes to hear the viewpoint of a man and why they may think the way they do. So, you know, going in line with the last question, the next one, question 4, do you think a man should have a say in how the woman that he is married to or dating spends her money? Now, my answer to this is quite different. I don't think a man should have a say in how a woman spends her money in the sense of telling her, like, you can spend it here or you can't spend it there. However, I'm the kind of person that if I really want to buy something, I might ask Josh, hey, look, I want to buy this, I don't know if it's a mug or something, for example. And I might say, do you think it's good value? Or, you know, do you think I could get it better value somewhere else? Because Josh, a bit like me, is really into, you know, looking online and stuff and in charity shops and so on for bargains. You know, we're a bargain house here. We love any kind of good deal, really, like, don't we? I mean, you know.
We sure do.
And, like, for me, it's important sometimes. Sometimes now, of course, I'll go and buy what I want and that's it, like. But, you know, sometimes I want someone's opinion as well. Like, do you think it's worth it? And sometimes Josh will think something isn't worth it, and I might frown at that, and I might say, you know, get a life. Not everything needs to be quite so cheap. But then other times, you know, he has a point. And as well as that, like, sometimes I find, like, I might want to buy something, and at one place that I'm looking for this object, it's quite expensive. But then I'll go to some other website and it'll be a lot less. So I appreciate the input of, like, finding the best value for money, I guess. So, like, do you think that, you know, men should have a say in how their woman is spending her money?
For me on this one, it comes down to, is what she's buying, and this goes both ways, is what he or she is buying going to affect the other person? I mean, for me, like, if Hannah likes to buy earrings, and if Hannah wants to buy earrings for herself, I think, you know, she's using her own money. I think that's completely up to her what kind of earrings she buys. I think, you know, whether I like them or not, that's not up to me. It's up to her. Her money, her taste. She's buying it for herself. I don't feel I have a choice in that, or a say in that. I feel that's completely up to her. That's her decision. But I suppose, for example, if Hannah was to buy something that was going to affect me, like she was buying it with her own money and maybe for herself, but it would affect me in some way. I'm trying to think of an example for that. I suppose it's more of a joint thing, but off the top of my head, if Hannah was out shopping or, you know, online shopping and I wasn't around and she saw a really nice air fryer that she wanted. Maybe we don't have one, or maybe it's an upgrade from the one we've already got. And she's like, you know what, I've got my own personal money, I could afford that, I think that's amazing. I'm gonna buy it. Now, it might be an upgrade, but I use the air fry probably every day. I think we all do. And so that would affect me. And, you know, again, it might be an upgrade, but it might not do a specific feature that previous one did. And that feature might be very important to me. And I suppose we could have 2 air fryers, but I think maybe this situation could have been avoided. It could have, you know, if I was there and I didn't import, maybe together we could have searched for an air fryer that, you know, did everything that we all want. You know, did all the same things as the last air fryer more. And it's her money. And, I agree with that, that's true. But if it's something that I'm going to be using, if it's something I use daily, or if it's something that's going to affect me in some way, I think even if it is the other person's money, I feel like there are certain things you should consult your partner on.
Definitely.
It's just an example off the top of my head. I'm sure there are much better examples I could have thought of, but I think you have to think when buying a product, is this just going to affect me, or is this going to affect other people too? I think if it is going to affect other people, even if it's your own money, I really feel like ideally you need to talk about it with them first. But if it's a very personal product and it's going to have nothing to do with the other person, like Hannah's earrings, Hannah should feel and should be more than free to buy what she wants. Absolutely.
That's very interesting, and it kind of brings up a point actually that I kind of almost didn't think of. But like when I was married before, I used to be out somewhere and I would see an item for the kitchen. Not an air fryer, no, nothing like that. But like, for example, I got a toasted sandwich maker. And I was like, this is absolutely fabulous. I've got this toasted sandwich maker. I'm gonna use it. And I bought it. However, I didn't think to stop and think, would others use it? And would they appreciate having it in the house? Now, technically, because I bought it, it's technically mine, so that kind of didn't matter, but I suppose what mattered to me is that the thought process for me wasn't there. So I had to actually learn at that point, okay, you're married. So now things are different. You're not just buying for you. There has to be a consideration for, for example, can you afford it? What is the house like? Will it fit in the house? Will there be room to store it? Things I didn't think of. And as an example, you just have to be conscious of these kind of things. And I remember actually my ex-husband, God love him, sweet man, a very sweet man. He got me an appliance for the kitchen that it turned out basically was a waste of money, and to be honest was terrible to use. And he had never thought, it was one of these viral things online that they say, flash sale now, this is fabulous, use. And to be honest, it was a crepe maker actually, but it was a really bad one and it didn't work. The idea was good, but like me, he kind of also didn't think, hey, is this wise? Does it work? Have we got room to put it somewhere? How often are we having crepes that we might need one? And so definitely what I learned from that experience is just to have more thought and think about more things. Because as Josh said about the air fryer, which, let's not lie, everybody uses in our house, definitely a discussion, would need to be had because it's important, and then so the next question then is, do you think that men get jealous? And if you do, why? Now, I suppose as a woman, my answer might be different. I think some men get jealous, but it's to do with them having an extreme insecurity themselves. For example, I've said in a previous episode that my face often betrays me at every turn. And so if I think someone looks attractive, the whole place is gonna know. I think I inherited that from my mom. Actually, it's quite embarrassing, but also quite fun. I mean, life is for living and having fun. Variety is the spice of life. And when I went to visit Josh when he was still living in Nottingham, and we went into this restaurant there, and I was looking at the guy serving, and, the guy took our order and walked off. Josh kind of said, yeah, he is attractive. And I thought, damn it, he had seen that I thought that. But, Josh is so, secure in his attachment to me. A bit like me, I'm securely attached as well. But he's so securely attached to me that I could literally tell Josh, I think that the guy beside us, for example, in the restaurant or wherever, is absolutely drop dead gorgeous. However, he is so secure in himself that he knows I'm just appreciating somebody's looks. It's not like I'm gonna run off and be with the guy. And I find people that are insecure tend to be very oh my god, you can't say that. Another good example I'll give now is at the moment we are currently watching Love is Blind season 9 in Denver. And there's an Asian guy there called Patrick. And Patrick was the only Asian person in his area for quite a while. And he was always told, he looked good for an Asian. And to be honest, he didn't think very highly of his own looks. And when you hear him talking about this, it's very obvious that, he has a very toxic self-view, all about the looks, and, people thinking that he's ugly or telling him that, or, him thinking that himself. And as a consequence, like, he's quite insecure in there. And instead of just simply looking for somebody to marry, he's also looking for someone who's gonna validate him and constantly be telling him he looks good. And I suppose, like, I should say, spoiler alert, the person he chooses, agrees to choose him, and it just doesn't basically work out. If I'm someone that's hearing someone constantly putting themselves down all the time, the first thing I'm gonna do when I see them is think about how they look, because it's what they think about the most. And so if someone doesn't find that they look good, I'm gonna be like, well, do they look good? And I think as a woman myself, like, there's nothing more attractive to me than a guy who knows that he is just divine. Like, Josh knows he is, the source, as they say in the UK, or the lick. Yeah, I watch, Little Black Book 91 on YouTube, so he has a lot of the UK slang. But, Josh knows, like, he's gorgeous, and he's so confident in himself. He doesn't need to be jealous or anything like that, because he'd understand that it's not healthy. Like my best friend, Dubby, for example, like, I have two best friends, one is a girl and one is a guy. I'm quite lucky in that respect. And even my best friend, who's the guy, he knows he's absolutely gorgeous and he's not jealous either. Definitely very healthy examples of men in my book. But then again, Josh, what do you think? Do you think men are jealous?
So my answer for this one is probably a little unconventional in the sense of, I'm glad you do.
If it's not weird, lads, we don't want it.
Oh, absolutely. We like different perspectives, just different anything. I would say, overall, I wouldn't say I'm too jealous of a person like Hannah was saying. And Hannah's not a jealous person at all, I would say. Have I been jealous in my life? Oh, absolutely, yeah. You show me someone who's never been jealous and I'll show you a liar. I think there's no such thing as someone who hasn't experienced jealousy. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes, as much as we don't want to be jealous, I think sometimes jealousy does slip through. Like, I would say I'm not much of a jealous person, but have I been jealous on occasion whilst I've been dating Hannah? Yeah, there's been a handful of situations. And for me personally, I don't think it's the jealousy that matters. I think it's what you do with the jealousy. So for me, those times I have been jealous, I've had to realize that jealousy is a me thing. That it's my problem, I'm the jealous one, no one's done anything wrong, this is something I've got to overcome and I've got to sort out myself. This is no one's, I suppose, burden but my own. No one's done anything wrong, no one deserves me to accuse them or treat them any differently or poorly because of the jealousy I might be feeling. It's a contained thing, I guess. And it's for me to sort out, for me to get through, for me to work out and work around. I think that's my overall view on this. My view is, if jealousy comes through, I think that's to an extent natural for man or woman, for anyone. But don't let that jealousy take over you. Don't act on that jealousy. Realize it's your jealousy. Realize you have to handle it. Realize it's a you thing. And don't weaponize that jealousy. Don't be using that jealousy to hurt others. That jealousy is yours and it's for you to handle.
Interesting. Very interesting. Josh, you've got us all curious now as to what was making you so jealous.
Let's see, a few occasions. So me and Hannah met online, and we met through a friend/dating site.
Yes.
And Hannah was still on the site even after we had started dating, which was fine. You set your profile to just looking for a relationship or friends. And Hannah, she wanted to keep using it to meet people from around the world.
Yes.
And it's fine. That's not an issue. It was just a matter of meeting friends. But on these sites, unfortunately, I think you get a lot of people that they don't look at the profile, they don't read it properly. Hannah's had a few, I suppose, instances with people not reading her profile properly. Mm-hmm. And straight away they're trying to hit on her.
Yeah, that's different for sure.
Definitely. Hannah's maybe showed me some of these profiles or shared details of these profiles. And some of these men that have approached her, and I know you kind of have to take what people say about themselves online with a pinch of salt. But some of these men, they've got successful jobs, so they've got an amazing talent, and I'm there like, I can't offer any of this stuff to Hannah. I don't have an amazing job. I don't have this amazing talent that they do. Again, I've never let the jealousy consume me. I've maybe been a bit jealous because of how great these people are and the fact that they're approaching Hannah. But again, that was my jealousy to handle. It was my jealousy to maintain, and it wasn't to be taken out or weaponized against anyone. It was for me to figure out, for me to solve, and for me to get past.
That's very interesting. And as Josh said, I stayed on the site, to make friends from all around the world because I find that fascinating. However, as I said in a previous episode, I'm too blunt and too direct for everybody. For those that don't know, I am a fire sign, I'm a Sagittarius, and boy, do we tell it like it is. Some of the idiots online who do not read the profile and then are messaging you stupid stuff. Like when Josh was kind of saying there that he felt kind of slightly jealous, I guess it kind of blew my mind because there's a reason people like that never succeed, and it's because they can't read the room. For example, if anybody reads my profile, they give you a couple of questions that they start the question, for example, the way to my heart is, and then you have to fill it in. So somebody might say, the way to my heart is pizza, for example. And one of the questions is, what attracts me the most or something to that effect. And I have in somewhere in my profile that you should always respect me and you should respect yourself. These people do not respect themselves. And the next question is kind of along this line about dating profiles. This is not, I suppose, to anybody in particular, but I suppose I'm just curious as to why Josh might feel that some men tend to send unsolicited pictures of their privates to women. Because I've gotten those numerous times. Now, to be honest, I don't understand. Some men will say, for example, rate it. How does it look? Which to me is quite silly. Like, do they really think they're going to get somewhere? Although what I've taken to doing now, which is rather fun, is if someone sends me a picture of their private parts, I usually say to them, surprise, I know your mom, and I'm going to tell her exactly what her son has been doing. Usually the men freak out and they don't do it anymore. Now, personally, I don't understand at all doing this, especially when it's unsolicited and someone hasn't asked for it. But, for example, when I was a teenager, basically in my mid-teens, I was understanding a lot about, the internet was kind of new then, and people would say to you, take a picture of your chest and send it to me, it would be so hot and stuff. I suppose being autistic at that point in my life, I felt like if someone asked you to do that, you had to. Otherwise, you didn't have any chance with anybody. And it was quite silly. I mean, I was only like 16 or something, and when you're young, there's a lot of like peer pressure. And I find like a lot of people when they're young, and this is something I had to learn, both male and female, a lot of people tell like lies about the things that they've done because they want to sound cool. No, they're not going to tell you that. They just want to sound cool. So a lot of the people have done hardly any of the things they say they've done. Just for street cred, now. And like I remember sending like a couple of pictures to a guy once, around that age, feeling like I absolutely had to. Otherwise I wasn't going to get the guy, and it did not make me feel very comfortable. Now he did ask, which to be honest also is not comfortable. I think unless you're in a secure and loving relationship with someone, then it's okay to ask for one. But don't be asking for one, lads, from someone that you're not dating or you're not with. And for goodness sake, do not send unsolicited pictures. Most of the time, we don't like it. It's disgusting, and as soon as we see it, like, we are judging you. And we are thinking, this guy probably has a small one and lives at home with his mom still. Because that's kind of, common sense, okay? Common sense. So I think some men send it because, I don't know, it makes them feel like they might be important or something. I'm not sure. Now, I'm interested, I suppose, in Josh's opinion. He never in his life probably sent one because he's actually respectful and has a good head on his shoulders. But I guess, Josh, I would just wonder, like, why do you think some men might send it?
First off, you're absolutely right. I've never done that, thankfully. I'm glad I haven't. I have two theories for this. And they're only theories because I've never done it myself or had the urge to do it myself. And I suppose both theories kind of work together. So, my first theory is, by sending that kind of picture, I think some men are looking for either a friend with benefits, a one-time or an occasional thing, or an extremely sexually active partner. So I feel like by sending that kind of picture, you can, I suppose for lack of a better word, root out who would be into that kind of thing. If that makes sense. Like if a woman replies and it's positive, it's like, yeah, she's probably quite sexually active. And you're doing a lot of sexual activities with her if you get the chance. Theory 2 is, I feel like some men, they use it as a trophy. It's, this is impressive, look how impressive this is, this will win you over because it's so impressive. And yeah, I think some men literally think this is so impressive, this is gonna put me in another league to every other man doing this. Like this is the thing that's gonna get her attention, get me to get her attention. So I think it's a mixture of those two as to why men do it.
And I suppose, like, for curiosity reasons, why have you never done it?
I suppose I've never felt comfortable, and I've always seen it as very, very sleazy. To me, if you have to rely on doing that, then I think that just says something about your morals, your moral compass. Morally, I just don't think it's a very appropriate thing to do.
Yeah.
Like, if I can't get someone just from, I suppose, my personality, the way I look, you know, this, that, and the other, then I don't get anyone. I wouldn't resort to showing any parts of myself off that aren't necessary to get someone. To me, that's just, morally, I couldn't live with myself. It's just it's very sleazy, and it's very, I think it says something about you as a character. So it would never be me.
Wow. And okay, that's very interesting. And so the next question then is, this is the last one. So the question is, do you think men truly understand how to help a woman during their time of the month? Now, if I was going to answer this, I would say actually this is dependent on the kind of man and the kind of woman. I think what all women should be saying to men, because men don't know anything unless we tell them. Because, you can't know stuff you're not told. I think all women should say to men, we're all different at this time of the month. Everybody is different and how they feel is different. Some women, for example, have bucket loads of pain. Some have mild pain. Some get no pain. To be honest, I hate the ones that get no pain. But that's because, it sucks for me to hear they get no pain. I sometimes can get a bit of pain. It's never too extreme, really. Like, sometimes it can be quite sore, but it's not too extreme. And I think, like, men, just as I said, don't realize that not all women are the same. Some, for example, some don't want to be touched at all. No, I'm the opposite. When it's my time of the month, I want to be as close as I can to Josh. I become extra cuddly. And to be honest, like, Josh is really excellent at, kind of being sensible, I guess, and using his brain and asking me, like, how can I help you? Like, the first time that I suppose he saw me with one, I got quite upset because I thought, like, oh no, is he gonna freak out that he might think it's nasty or anything like that? And he totally didn't, he really supported me and he made sure that I was okay. And even, as time went on, like, Josh bought me a waist belt, a heated belt which heats up and vibrates, which absolutely changed my life when it came to cycle time. And, like, he is so good and so attentive and thinks a lot to ask questions so he can learn. Now he knows, he now knows. Sometimes, like, one of the worst traits, I guess, of me as a Sagittarius is impatience. And I find like when it's my time of the month, my impatience meter just goes through the roof. I'm impatient with myself and I'm impatient with everybody else as well. And sometimes, I think as women, sometimes, we can be a bit harder on ourselves as well. Like I sometimes expect myself to have all the answers or to get everything right all the time. And that's not realistic. Like we don't all get everything right all the time. That's just not how this goes. So some men don't ask questions to find out how they can help a woman because they don't want to know. And, some men are just, like Josh, are very attentive. Other men, as I said, can be quite mean about it, and to those men, I would probably say to them, have a very serious think about where it is you came from and think about that because, you came from a woman and you should be supporting the women you're with. Again, nothing wrong with somebody saying they don't understand how to help. But to any men who kind of are out there that think it's a bit disgusting or a bit gross, to be honest, lads, grow up. You need to get a life. And if you're ever having kids, you'll have to just be very open-minded. Ask the woman that you're with, how can I help you? You can't know unless you ask her. And ladies, tell him. Some men are not even going to think to ask because they may fear, for example, that they might get their head bitten off if they did ask. However, I don't think it's appropriate to be biting someone's head off if they're taking the time to ask you how they can help. Tell them, I don't want you to touch me right now. Please go away. And like, as I say sometimes, it's like, you feel like saying, I love you, but go away, like. Do you know what I mean? So I suppose, Josh, like, do you think, how do you think men are at supporting people during their time at someone?
I think it depends. I think some men, it's not so much their fault. Like maybe they're an only child or they've only ever grown up in a house full of men and would never have to know these things or have to learn these things. So they never do. So when it does come up to them, I think sometimes they just don't know because they've never had to know. So I think sometimes it's not necessarily the man's fault. Like again, even when they do get with someone and they have their period, some girls can keep that kind of thing to themselves. They can be maybe a bit secretive about it, or kind of keep it on a need-to-know basis.
Yeah.
So even then, some men they're not put in a position where they're kind of made to learn or to understand. So sometimes they never do, or at least they don't for years on end until they are put in a situation where they have to, and then it's like, I've never had to learn, I've never had to know, so now that I do have to do it, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, for example, I was going to ask, like before, at Christmas time, there was an emergent situation where I needed you to go and buy me some heads. Like, how did that make you feel? How did you feel about that? Because I know some men would have been terrified, and they would have felt quite nervous. How did you feel?
For me personally, I guess I'm just one of those people that it really doesn't bother. I kind of view it as, she needs me, this is a natural thing, I'm not doing anything wrong, I'm not doing anything inappropriate. The person behind the counter, if they're even thinking about it, probably knows why I'm buying them, or it's a good idea. Like they know that I'm buying them for a woman in my life. To me, if anyone's making a big fuss about that, then I think they're just viewing it all wrong. They're making it into something it really shouldn't be or doesn't have to be. It's a natural thing. Anyone who judges you for it is just, what the appropriate would be.
Tim would.
I suppose Tim would, yeah. Like, if anyone's making a big deal out of that, it's like, what is the big deal? Why is this not natural? Why is this not normal? Why is this something to, make a situation out of? So I think now some men are good. I would say some men are good.
You are.
Oh, thank you, sweet. I think, maybe, I suppose for me, for example, like I've never had to learn before being with Hannah. Like everyone I've been with before, they've mostly kept it to themselves. Like they've maybe told me they're on it, but beyond that, I've never had to do anything for them. And I suppose, to be honest, when I had to help Hannah, I didn't completely know what I was doing. I just thought, how would I want to be treated in this situation? So I just used my initiative to do what I thought I could. I thought was the right thing.
And I think it helps too, by the way, that I'm not an angry cycle person. Because I think some of the people that you were with before kind of would get quite shouty and moody at their time of the month. Which, guys, that's not cool. And I don't like people that get like that. Any woman, and I understand sometimes, you feel pain and you do feel angry because you're feeling pain. But I would never take that out on the person that I love most. And I think I might maybe not be correct, but I think that kind of surprised Josh, how kind of attached and kind of, into being a lot closer to him physically I was, and how calm I was at that time of the month. I just need loads more cuddles, and I get very into showing him even more love at that time of the month because I just feel kind of tender or something, Was that a surprise to you that someone could be relaxed and calm at their time of the month?
After my experiences, yeah. Yes, it was a first for me. And it was a nice first.
Oh,
I'm glad.
Of course. I mean, lads, I definitely won the lottery here with Josh. He is the best at caring for me at that time of the month. And to be honest, I know he's with me, but I feel, anyone would be lucky to have a guy like that, really. And I hope for most of you that you do have a guy like that, because it makes the whole process easier. It's definitely easier when you have a partner that understands. And it's even easier again when you have a partner that understands that you may not always understand why you're feeling what you're feeling. I had to learn that myself over years. I had to learn to understand how, why I was feeling the way that I was feeling. And to also understand that sometimes you're not going to know why you're feeling that way, and that's okay as well. You don't have to beat yourself up. We're quite lucky as people that we have each other in this regard. And, we're just lucky that way. So, thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of the podcast. We've loved having you here. It's been fabulous. And if you want to leave any questions, that you would like either a male or female perspective on, please leave them in the comments down below. We hope that you subscribe to the channel and that you like the video and share it with your friends. We'd like to reach as many people as we can. Thank you so much for tuning in. Take care, everybody, and, wherever you're listening from, stay lovely.
Yeah, thank you very much for listening again, or listening for the first time. Again, like Hannah was saying, if you'd like to drop a comment, then we'll absolutely reply to it. So, feel free to. We'll get back to you as soon as we can. Just, thank you for your time. Thank you for your your subscription, just thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of this with us. Thank you very much. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.